end of central banking. The economy is imploding. Expect all fingers pointing at the Fed. Central banking is the single biggest threat for humanity. The promise of socialism is the justification to plunder. The economy is in a meltdown. The world's monetary system is being deliberately destroyed. Consequently, the economic signals that guide the markets, which in a free market are supposed to represent the supply and demand decisions of billions of people, have up to now all been totally false, despite frequent denials by the central banks and most mainstream economists. These distortions in the market are a result of intentional manipulations of currency and precious metal values around the world by these central bankers, crafted in response to demand for competing export opportunities, easy money, and cheaper credit by governments. The world is indoctrinated to believe that paper money, the symbol of wealth, is that can deliver all the benefits of the free market, while gold is a barbarous, useless metal. This, of course, isn't true. All central banks are owned by Rothschild. All these banks are responsible for the economic problems. Therefore, all these banks must be brought down together. In other words, we must bring down the entire Rothschild banking system. We must break away from the central banking system and return to a people's currency system by implementing a people's economy. It should be an economy in which we, the people, are in charge and in full control of the money supply. You know, like our Constitution says. Most people overlook this aspect of the economy, but this monetary system is a great part of the deep state's power. By controlling the currency system of every country, the people of the world are easily controlled, with economic growth instituted on the base of fraud and corruption. That's the reason why these central banks don't want to be audited. The banking system is riddled with waste, fraud, abuse, crime, corruption, blackmail, deception. And when one takes a deeper look into the governments that are factually based on this Rothschild system, it's all about crime and corruption. It is the exact same thing that takes place in the financial sector. What needs to be done is the entire economic system needs to be brought to its knees, like they've brought countries, while all the crimes of the complicit banksters needs to be exposed. But before they are brought down, Trump is continually blaming the central bank for the bad economy, over and over again. Why? In order to waken people up, so they are awake to these truths and eventually better understand and see this gigantic crime network for what it is, working against humanity. Meanwhile, Trump has tricked the MSN, mainstream media, to go along with him, where they are too now blaming the Fed bank system for deteriorating the economy. It is impossible to improve the current economy with a financial system that is based on this debt. The whole system has to be destroyed. The power must be given back to the people, since all financial schemes are malicious Rothschild inventions, including institutions like the BIS, the IMF, the ECB, the WB, the BOJ, so on, so forth. By raising the interest rates, the system will break down, at which time the focus can be shifted to the Fed, the ECB, the BOJ, etc. Central banking is the single biggest threat for humanity. The central bank is the biggest threat to the world. The amount of control and power that a central bank has in each country is simply off the charts. No one else has so much power, enabling them to make or break countries by putting countries into debt. Matter of fact, the only thing that gives our money value is how much of it is in circulation. Therefore, the power to regulate the money supply is also the power to regulate its value, which is also the power to bring entire economies and societies to its knees. Look no further than in the 1930s here in America. Now the central banks consequently do exactly what they want. Once a country is put into debt, for then they have the leverage to control them. They know this very well. They've studied it, they've practiced it, and they've done it in real time for centuries. This truly is the single biggest threat to the world. That is the reason this financial system has got to be destroyed, while at the same time making sure that never again does a central bank wiggle its way into existence anywhere. The people have a right to coin their own currency. Nowadays, governments are devaluing the money constantly, causing everything that people have worked for to disappear right before their very eyes. We simply need to return to a real asset-backed monetary system without a private central bank, and let the people take control. Now keep in mind, the Federal Reserve Central Bank is the last remaining game of the deep state. The Federal Reserve is its backbone. Reports suggest that the alliance is preparing for one last push on the deep state by proposing to end the Fed. Now this termination will be the final blow that will render the deep state powerless, ensuring their complete demise. There's no turning back for them this time. The course of humanity will be changed in the blink of an eye. It will be shocking, and many who are oblivious to the truth will be overwhelmed and most likely in disbelief. The beginning of a very painful process of awakening for those who are not yet awake. I'm Michael. This is a Patriot Hour. God bless, Godspeed to each and every one of you worldwide. Where we go one, we go all. And remember, this is not about religions or party affiliation. Evil is everywhere. There are no drawn lines, no boundaries. Good versus evil. There is nothing more precious than our children. The choice to know will be ultimately yours. These people are sick, and good will always defeat evil. And we understand that there is extreme fatigue and frustration regarding the wheels of justice and how they move slow, but exclude your emotion and your personal desire. Instead, use logic and critical thinking based on situational awareness. What does it take to undo a lifetime of evil and corruption and infestation to the highest levels? In the span of less than 2 years, with a corrupt DOJ and FBI and etc. and so on. This is process and planning of law and order, a military operation at its finest. God bless. Trump suckered Democrats and the deep state into a trap that will enable a radical downsizing of the federal bureaucracy. In only 4 more days of the already longest government shutdown in history, 26 days and counting as of today, a heretofore obscure threshold will be reached, enabling permanent layoffs of bureaucrats furloughed 30 days or more. Don't believe me that federal bureaucrats can be laid off? Well, in the bureaucraties of a layoff, it is called a RIF, R-I-F, or a reduction in force. And of course, it comes with a slew of civil service protections. But if the guidelines are followed, bureaucrats can be laid off, as in no more job. A reduction in force is a thoughtful and systematic elimination of positions. For all practical purposes, a government RIF, reduction in force, it is the same as a layoff. Organizations must stick to the predetermined criteria when sorting out what happens to each employee. They must communicate with employees on how and why decisions are made. In deciding who stays and who goes, federal agencies must take 4 factors into account. 1. Tenure. 2. Veteran status. 3. Total federal civilian and military service time. 4. Performance. Agencies cannot use RIF procedures to fire bad employees. A lot of procedures must be followed, and merit, performance, is the last consideration. But based on the criteria above, employees already furloughed can be laid off once they have been furloughed for 30 days or 22 work days. When agencies furlough employees for more than 30 calendar days or 22 discontinuous work days, they must use the RIF procedures. An employee can be terminated or moved into an available position. Now, this seems to be what was referenced in the remarkable essay written by an unidentified senior Trump official published in the Daily Caller, which vouches for the authenticity of the author and explains that it is protecting him from adverse career consequences should his name become known. I strongly recommend reading the whole article. I will be doing a video on that tomorrow. Now, the purported senior official makes the case that the devotion to the process eats up most of the time of the federal bureaucrats and is also used by enemies of the President Trump's initiatives to stymie the legitimate orders issued by his senior officials. Now, on the average day, roughly 15% of the employees around me are exceptionally patriots serving their country. I wish I could give competitive salaries to them and no one else. But 80% feel no pressure to produce results. If they don't feel like doing what they are told, they don't. Why would they? We can't fire them. They avoid attention, plan their weekend, schedule vacation, their second jobs, their next position. Some do this in the same position for more than a decade. They do nothing that warrants punishment and nothing of an external value. This is their workday. Errands for the sake of errands, administering, refining, following and collaborating on process. Process is your friend, is what the delusional civil servants tell themselves. Even senior officials must gain approval from every rank across their department, other agencies, and work units for basic administrative chores. Then the senior official noted what I have just called up the trap. Most of my career colleagues actively work against the president's agenda. This means I typically spend about 15% of my time on the president's agenda and 85% of my time trying to stop sabotage. And we have no power to get rid of them until the shutdown. Those officials who waste time and stymie the president's initiatives now are not present because they are not categorized as essential. Due to the lack of funding, many federal agencies are now operating more effectively from the top down on a fraction of their workforce, with only select essential personnel serving national security tasks. Now, President Trump can end this abuse. Senior officials can reprioritize during an extended shutdown, focused on valuable results, and weed out the saboteurs. We do not want most employees to return, folks, because we're working better without them. Keep in mind that saboteurs cannot be individually identified in RIF or reduction in force, but they can be included in the layoffs if they meet the criteria above in the terms of seniority and service, and they must be given 60 days notice. But once they are gone, they are no longer free to obstruct using the process as their friend, because they are gone. You can expect lawsuits on every convincible point, and I suspect that the definition of furlough will be one matter of dispute. Now, if this was the plan all along, it would explain why President Trump kind of tricked Chuck and Nancy in his televised meeting with them last year, boasting that he would claim credit for the shutdown. How could they resist a prolonged shutdown when he made it so easy to blame him? Now, President Trump has proven that he is a disruptor who changes the framework of thinking on major issues by refusing to accept the givens, the assumptions of how things have always been and always been done, and therefore always must be done. Business as usual. So who is this senior official that wrote that letter? I'm going to be looking into it before I do a video tomorrow, but I don't know. But I think Stephen Miller is the sort of blood thinker who might volunteer to telegraph the strategy just at this point, 4 days before the deadline. Give Chuck and Nancy something to think about and probably reject as unthinkable. Then they can't complain that they weren't warned once the trap has been sprung. Such a mass reduction in force would be the Trump version of a Ronald Reagan firing the air traffic controllers. The air traffic controllers, if we all remember that, when they went on an illegal strike in 1981. That was completely unexpected by his enemies, and it was highly criticized, but it was successful. Among other benefits, it taught the leaders of the USSR that Ronald Reagan was a man whose threats cannot be dismissed as mere rhetoric. If you think that the Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, Angela Merkel, and other foreign leaders would not draw some conclusion from a massive reduction in force, then you're kidding yourself. My theory may be completely wrong, but I pray that it is not. Folks, thanks for stopping by. Please subscribe. This is Michael. God bless. Godspeed to each and every one of you worldwide. Where we go one, we go all. The government will not reopen until the swamp is drained.